emotions are energy.
Mhm.
Energy, you can't see energy, you can't touch energy, but we know when we feel an emotion, it's real. So I use the analogy of air. Okay. So think about air. You know it's there. We
Right.
can't touch it, we can't see it, but we know it's there. But if I took a Ziploc bag and I just shut my Ziploc bag really fast, what would happen to the bag? We would see that it takes up space. Energy takes up space. And so every emotion we have, takes up space. We have a billion little Ziploc bags, if you will, all over us.
Welcome to the Self Within podcast, where we will look to ancient traditions and modern insights to seek guidance, knowledge, and practical tools to help us reconnect with our true selves. Join me, your host, as we explore various topics from mindfulness and meditation to energy healing, astrology, and much more. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Self Within. So, it is Mental Health Awareness Month, and today I am joined by Jill Vetstein, who has been a licensed clinical social worker for over 25 years. She sees clients virtually in the state of Massachusetts and in person in Natick, Massachusetts at her private practice. Jill combines traditional talk mental therapies with energy psychology, play therapy, and mind, body, and soul modalities. She also integrates energy healing into therapy and has standalone energy healing services as well. Welcome, Jill. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, mental health is such a big topic nowadays. And we live in a time where we are very fortunate to have such a big emphasis placed on it. I sort of wanted to start off with maybe a bit more of a generalized view and your perspective on what really classifies as mental health.
Sure. No, I think it's an important question because I think mental health, mental illness, kind of gets all mushed together and people don't really understand the difference. And we talk about physical health all the time without talking about illness, right? So why can't we talk about mental health without talking about mental illness, right? So mental health is really about the functioning of our cognitive abilities and our emotions. So I look at that as our emotional, our psychological, and our social well being. It's how we think, how we feel, how we cope, how we relate to others, and how we function really in our daily life. It's our inner worlds, and it's how we navigate our inner world in our life. So when we're thinking about mental health, there's a spectrum. And so I'm trying to look at it more as maybe mental wellness, if that's a better way to put it. But it's really about how we're functioning with our emotions and with our thoughts.
Yeah, okay. I like thinking about that. There was something I read the other day too, which is we all have good and bad days. And I think about that from a mental, emotional perspective. And that's where I see the two combined in a way. Our emotions can impact how we think and vice versa.
Yes. Well, you make a really good point. I mean, we're human. We all are going to have emotions and feelings no matter what. We can't escape it. Even though there's people out there who would like to push them down, shut them off, and not feel them, it doesn't mean they're not there. So, as humans, we feel things, we experience the world, and we have a nervous system, regardless of whether we want to believe it or not. We have a nervous system that gets regulated and dysregulated. And we have a normal, natural response of fight, flight, freeze, fawn. These are all things that just are part of being human beings. And so that all is under the umbrella of mental health. And it doesn't mean that if we feel something that we have an illness, it just means that we're operating the way we're supposed to operate. And when we're talking about mental illness, it's when we have the feelings, emotions, dysregulations that everyone has, but they are in a place where we can't regulate them. It's total dysregulation. And we are not able to get out of the rut of it. And it's impacting our life significantly. So for each mental illness, there's criteria that one has to check in order to fit the criteria of that diagnosis. But it's basically just being human, but getting stuck, if you will, if that makes sense. The issues are that, and there's so many different mental illnesses. So I am saying not generalized. There's a
Yeah.
lot more specifics out there. But the problem I think makes the lines blurry is the way insurance works.
Oh, okay.
Because when you go to primary care for a wellness visit, there is a code for wellness visits. And then if you come for a sick visit, there are codes for insurance for sinus issues or like there's codes for all those things. For insurance, there is not any code for wellness for mental health. You have to, in order to have insurance pay out mental health services, there has to be a code of a diagnosis. So we're
Oh, okay.
in a system that is pathologizing and it doesn't necessarily benefit our culture that way, but that is how it operates right now.
Oh, okay. So if you go in with like high anxiety, or maybe it's been going on for a little while, for insurance to cover that, you have to be essentially diagnosed on like the further end of the spectrum. Is that what you're saying?
There's different categories of anxiety. So I wouldn't say the further end spectrum of the anxiety diagnosis, but it is pathologizing. You have to say generalized anxiety or anxiety over XYZ. There's a whole list of them. There is a code called adjustment disorder, where it's basically having a hard time adjusting with the transitions or whatever's happening in your life, but it still is a disorder, right? It's not really a disorder, but it's categorized as one. In order for someone to want to use their insurance, or like myself, I'm out of network. So clients pay me upfront, but then I give them super bills to then get reimbursement from their insurance. I still have to use the codes if that's the case. And the
Hmm.
codes are identifying the person as having the diagnosis, something that is like a disability of an emotional disability, which it really isn't. And that's where us therapists have such a hard time in the ethics of taking insurance, not taking insurance, and doing what we need to do to get people what they need. And don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people who fit the category of these
Yeah, yeah.
diagnoses and they do need support and they do need help. But I'm a firm believer that we all have growth, we all have healing, we all have evolution, and we all deserve to have someone walk that walk with us and help us understand what's underneath it all. And it's a tricky system we live in right now because mental health and mental illness are so blurred.
Right. And even when you're saying that, there can be people that definitely fit the diagnosis. For those that don't, but then get labeled, I'm just thinking of law of attraction, right? Are we then essentially telling someone, like, hey, this is what we've coded you as? And do they then start to think that is what they have? Am I
Mhm.
making sense? 'Cause I'm
Totally.
thinking about law of attraction. It's like, whatever you're telling yourself, or if you hear someone say that to you, then do you make that your reality? And then do you end up having it? I mean, I can see this path and
Well, like, yeah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and I completely believe in the law of attraction. And it's a big part of my therapy is unique in that I'm integrating laws of the universe, energy healing, energy psychology. And so I'm talking about that stuff all the time. So I totally get you, follow you, and agree that could potentially be the case. But I think any good clinician, any good therapist is going to explain. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people who are in a deep depression, and that is the correct diagnosis for them. And there are plenty of people whose anxiety disorder is debilitating. And then you have more of the average people who are experiencing challenges in their life. And us therapists are trying to figure out, okay, which category do you fall the best in? It's not the same as diagnosing someone with a heart condition or diabetes. Diabetes is a lifelong diagnosis, right?
Mhm.
This is not the same. This is fluid. Mental health is fluid. Unless you're in the personality disorder category, that's totally separate. Mental health and mental illness is fluid. We feel 50 million things throughout a day. Do we really think we're going to fit into a category throughout our life? We're shifting and we're flowing. And the more we learn how to have regulation tools, the more we learn how to heal old wounds, the more we learn how to move the energy out of our system, which is really how I focus on it, the different we're going to be. I really believe that emotions are energy.
Mhm.
Energy, you can't see energy, you can't touch energy, but we know when we feel an emotion, it's real. We can't grab it. So I use the analogy of air. Okay. So think about air. You know it's there. We
Right.
can't touch it. We can't see it, but we know it's there. But if I took a Ziploc bag and I just shut my Ziploc bag really fast, what would happen to the bag?
Would fill up or
Yeah, it'd
possibly
be
like
full.
explode at some point.
Yeah, it'd be full, right?
Yeah.
We would see that it takes up space. Energy takes up space. And so every emotion we have, it's part of the body, right? It takes up space. We have a billion little Ziploc bags, if you will, all over us. And if
Mhm.
we don't process our emotions and we don't feel them fully, they're building. I kind of think of them more like a rock or like a brick. They get hardened and they get solidified, and we just keep building them one on top of the other inside of us. We have these analogies that we talk about in our cultures like baggage, right? For the weight of the world. We know this analogy. It's heavy. I am feeling heavy because we're not releasing the air out of these bags. We're not feeling the feelings. We're not processing them. But anyone, I don't care how much trauma someone's had, from the spectrum of just like life stressful to like severe trauma, anyone can release those bags. Anyone can move that energy out of their system. And so that's why I think therapy is so helpful for everyone, regardless of what category they fall into for insurance. We process our feelings and our emotions and we learn to regulate our body. We're going to be in a different state.
So I love the analogy of the Ziploc bag, and I'm totally going to use this in another scenario because it so clearly paints the picture. We can all think of that. I even think of those packaging bags that we get in like Amazon shipments, the ones that are really tight. You talked about them hardening, that are like you actually need like a scissor or something to like pop it open, right? Yeah, that's what I think about. And so, yeah, if you start to imagine you have all of these bags inside of you, and not even releasing them. I had a therapist once that talked about me like imploding. It's like, oh, you don't explode, but you're imploding. And that even sounded worse than an explode. Cause I'm like, at least if I explode, it's like out in the open and it's able to like go into the air or in the atmosphere. But imploding, it's just going into my own system. And I was like, oh no. But yeah, so how can we begin to release, or how do you help your clients regulate their nervous system and begin to create some openings in those bags?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking that. So there's so many ways. There's so many modalities of therapy, and I'm for all of them. Some people are more in, you had mentioned before, like do thoughts cause emotions cause thoughts. There's modalities like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's DBT. There's so many modalities out there. I mean, literally hundreds of them. And I think they're all valid. I personally use energy psychology modalities because I have just learned over time sometimes understanding something is enough to release it. That is true. Sometimes it clicks for us. Oh, suddenly our whole perception changes. And therefore, our actions change and our emotions change and our behaviors change. So sometimes just talking through something is enough, but sometimes it's not. Understanding and knowing something doesn't necessarily change it. For example, let's say you have a smoker and they know smoking is bad for them. Understanding smoking is bad for them is one thing, but changing it is another, right? So I'm just using that as an example is sometimes knowing isn't enough, right?
Right.
So I have found going deeper than talk therapy is really, really helpful. And so energy psychology, there's many modalities under that's like an umbrella of many other modalities. But the concept of energy psychology is that we are moving the energy out of our system. So somatically out of our body. For those who are more spiritual, we're also moving it like on a soul level. We're healing it generationally, lineage wise. We could be healing it past life wise. It really depends on your belief system and where you're willing to go.
Mhm.
But that's what energy psychology does. It shifts and moves it, and it moves those little packaging bags or Ziploc bags out of our system. There's many that we use, but my very favorite is called advanced integrative therapy, also known as just AIT. For the sake of my clients, I often will just call it top down breathing. because we're starting at the top and we're working our way down. So I work with a couple different populations. So I talk about it differently depending on who I'm talking to. So I work with adults, I work with a lot of parents, and I work with kids. So for kids, I definitely say we're going to wash the yuckies down right from the top, down and out. Okay. But this modality, the first step is you hone in on where you're somatically holding this. When we're feeling emotions, we can't always tune in, but usually the majority of that energy is stuck somewhere. Heavy on my heart, pit in my stomach, right? That solar plexus rib cage feeling, or like you feel unsteady, like at your root, or your head is throbbing. Like we can often find it. So in this modality, we tune into ourselves and we see if we can find that space. And if we can, we put one hand there. And that hand just stays there, kind of like a TLC hand, tender loving care hand. And the amazing thing, our bodies and our brains are so intelligent, but they're also a little gullible. And so we love touch. And when we feel touch, actual hormones and chemical reactions happen from our brain, and it doesn't decipher who the touch is from.
Mm.
So just touching yourself can have such healing properties to begin with. Okay. So if we hone in on the area, whatever, our heart, for example, we'll put our hand on our heart. Then this modality creates a focus statement. The focus statement can be really simple. I'm overwhelmed. Can be a little more complex. I'm pissed off at my husband, right?
Mm.
It can be really complex, which I don't recommend people doing on their own. But with me in the therapy room, it might be like a whole paragraph. It might be all the times and ways, and if they're open to it, lives, generations, realities. I get overwhelmed when I hear my boss raise his voice because it reminds me how my dad was so verbally abusive when he used to blink, 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 blink. You know what I mean? Like we can go really long and in depth and whatever, what have you. Hmm. But for the sake of me teaching this, simple statement, I'm overwhelmed. Okay, which is an often one. So then we focus on the statement because we're trying to capture the energy. We're trying to tap into the energy, and words have energy. I was actually talking to someone. I'm doing a yoga teacher training currently because, why not add more tools to my bag of tricks? I never seem to stop training myself on something. And I was
So many people have that, by the way. Like once you get into this teacher or practitioner space, you can never get enough certifications. And I think it's a double-edged sword because there's a part of it that's like you want to serve your clients more. There's a part of it that's like you want to, obviously, of course, it's your own growth. And then I've also found the flip side of that is like people might think that it's not enough, like they're not enough. And that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, just wanted to interject.
it's very true. And I have come to learn that I have plenty and everything I do is very effective. And I love to learn tools. I love to integrate things. I'm not someone who will learn something and do it step by step protocol. I'm always making it my own. So I love to borrow from things. But I was talking to this yoga teacher training and she's trying to teach us to be somatic in our body. And she's like, why would you say a statement that goes into your head, stay in your body? And I was like, well, that's one narrative. But another narrative is we're capturing the energy. And words have so much power, so much energy. So that is the philosophy. The person who created this modality, Asha Clinton, that was her framework, is these words hold the energy. So you make the statement and then you literally put your hands or your focus, if you're like in a business meeting or your child's IEP meeting or something and you're feeling really overwhelmed, you go ahead and just focus on the body parts rather than put your hands there. But you literally start from your top bottom. So you start on top of your head and you focus your hand on the top of your head and you say the statement, I'm so overwhelmed. And you breathe. And you keep breathing until you feel some release, some relaxation. And then you work your way down and you work your way down to your forehead. You say the statement and you breathe until you feel some release. And you keep working your way down. You go to your chin, your throat, you go to your heart, your chest holds a lot of weight. So you do both sides of chest in the middle and both sides. You go down to your solar, which is your rib cage. You go down to your belly button. You go down to your pelvis. You go into your hips because we hold so much in our hips, and you go to your root. So the idea is that even though I may say, oh, I feel it in my heart, my chest feels heavy, energy is in every energy center. So we're going to focus on where it's hold the most, but we're also going to release from all of our chakras, from all of our energy centers. And as we breathe through and focus in on those areas with the intention of letting it go, it is so powerful. I've never had a client not experience. The only one who says it doesn't work is my teenage daughter, who refused to admit that anything I say or do has any validity.
That's a whole nother thing. Yeah.
But other than that, every person I have ever walked through this with at any age has felt such enormous release, because I imagine it as every time we're at a different chakra point, those Ziploc bag is just seeping the air out, right? So you're like tea kettle, opening it up and letting the steam out. And I know I went through that fast and it sounds a little complicated. It's super simple. And if you don't remember all the body parts to breathe through, even if you breathe through 2 or 3, even if you just put your hand on your heart and your belly and you did it. But I do have a free gift that I can tell people about the end on my website that literally walks you through exactly how to do it. It's a video of me explaining it. It's a diagram of the body parts and it's like a step by step if anyone's interested in wanting to learn it. But it is so powerful. So that's my favorite way to move the energy out. An analogy I like to give is the sailboat analogy. Sometimes we can take the sailboat out of the water. Okay. Sometimes we can make it better. Sometimes we can't make it better. Sometimes all we can do is take the wind out of the sail. Like we can't change something. If something happened to you, we can't change that it happened to you. I can't take that sailboat out of the water, but I can take the charge out of it, or we can take the charge out of it, right? By taking the wind out of the sail. A situation may be happening. We may be in a situation that doesn't feel good. We can't change the situation, but we can change how our system is responding to it. Sometimes, though, which is beautiful, the sailboat disappears. Because once we let go of the energy we're holding onto, we create these narratives and these stories because we're dragging the baggage with us. But if we can get rid of the baggage, suddenly that story doesn't really hold weight for us anymore. It like dissipates. It's not true for us anymore. So sometimes we get lucky and we can absolutely get rid of that sailboat completely.
Yeah. When you were talking about words holding energy, have you ever heard of the water experiment by Dr. Masaru Emoto?
It's in the back of my head. Can you refresh my memory? Because it does sound familiar to me.
He was a Japanese researcher, and what he did is he had these like cups or vials of water, and he would expose them to different words or pictures. And so, for example, some of the words were positive, some of them were negative. Same with pictures, right? Some of them were positive, some of them were negative. He also exposed them to music, like things like classical music on one end of the spectrum. The water that was exposed to the positive music or imagery or words would have these beautiful crystalline structures. I mean, they would look like snowflakes from like Frozen, like something else I would have created, right? And then the ones that were exposed to the negative words and imagery had no shape. I mean, they were essentially these just like blobs. And that's something I had taken a course a couple of years back about how to teach children about this. And this is one of the things that I tell my kids all the time. It's like things that we say to ourselves, and of course, things that we say to others, even if it's not directed at anyone, but we're putting it out into the atmosphere, into our environment, it can have a negative impact on us, obviously, if it's not good, because we're also made up of about 70% water, right? And I always say that to them. If you can imagine the water crystals within you, right? So I love that you mentioned that because I'm a firm believer in how meaningful and important words are and what we say.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful study. I've heard other studies similar. I also have some training in some hypnosis and things like that. And so one of the things that like experiments that you do is like you have like food in a vial and you talk to them and you see which spoil first.
Right.
Like actual experiments of like if you talk to one nicely, there's been experiments, you could Google forever on this, of like talking to some plants nicely and talking to other plants unkindly and seeing what happens. The power of words is huge. The power of words, because your words are your thoughts and our thoughts are energy. And law of attraction, we attract the energy of what we're putting out, right? But I love the connection to the water because of our bodies being 70% water. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that like it hits home, right? Because you're like, oh, okay. Like there's a part of me that can also become this crystal structure or not, right?
Mm.
So yeah.
And I ask people all the time, ask clients all the time. I also teach a new mom, a mindful mom and baby class, and we talk about this every session. I always say, okay, think about how you talk to yourself. Now raise your hand if you would ever say the same things to a friend or to someone you know. And no one will raise their hand. And I'm like, why not? Oh, that's too mean. That's too cruel. I would never talk to someone that way. And it's like, I know, but yet here
Yeah.
you are doing it to ourselves. And that's energy. Yeah,
I had this thought the other day because I carry a lot of mom guilt, which I think moms in general probably carry a lot of mom guilt too.
for sure.
But I find myself saying to myself that I think I'm a bad mom. And I say that a lot. And the other day, it hit me, and I don't know why it hit me the other day, but I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm literally doing the thing that I preach like not to do, which is I'm using these negative words toward myself, and of course, I'm attracting my own reality." So I totally had that moment of, "Oh, I need to shift that." So it's exactly what you said. We don't think about it. It's almost like, well, we have the permission to be cruel to ourselves because it's us.
Yeah, the way we treat ourselves really matters. And I think that it's very normal. I mean, we live in a society and a culture are constantly telling us we're not good enough. I mean, that's literally what marketing is all about, is telling us how we don't have enough, we don't do it well enough, we need this to do it better, right? And that's sort of our culture and our society. So, of course, we're going to have an inner critic that's going to be saying those things too. Our voices inside of us are just parts. I kind of live in a couple models, do some IFS work. So I think about it as parts. I do inner child work. So I think about it as like our wounded children within ourselves. I look at it as like archetypes. I kind of hold all the frameworks. And the inner critic is always built based on the exposure it's had. It's like we're going to say it to ourselves before the outside voices are going to say it to us as like a protection. And we're going to probably say it harsher and crueler to try to protect ourselves from something else or someone saying we're not good enough, we failed, or whatever it is that we're afraid of, unconsciously, subconsciously, or consciously. But the inner critic is built out of mirroring what's been around. And we live in society and a culture that teaches us constantly, especially moms. It's impossible to meet the criteria because if you can't win, you're always going to lose because you're supposed to be an independent person who can do it all, but you do it all and you're stressed out. That's a whole other podcast about like what happens to
Yeah.
mothers in society. Our inner voice is shaped by what we've learned growing up, right?
Mhm.
And so it's patterns, it's background patterns. I'm constantly working on this. I haven't unprogrammed every pattern I have. It's, a bit of a lifelong journey, but I've unprogrammed many, and there are many more that I'm working towards. But it's this just being aware and conscious of the thoughts, noticing them because they are happening in the background constantly. We can't stop it if we're not aware of it. You had asked me before this, like about dysregulation. And I think a part of dysregulation is we're in a constant loop, right? We're not conscious, we're not aware, we're not stopping, we're not pausing, we're not able to have this awareness of what's the chatter going on in my brain right now?
Mm.
Is this helpful to me or is this harmful to me? And if this is not helpful to me, what can I do to shift it?
I thought about what you were saying with protecting ourselves and the role of the protector and No, I don't know if you exactly said this, but this is what resonated in my head, which is we are almost meaner to ourselves as a form of protection from
Yeah.
potentially what we may hear. And I had not thought about it that way. Like it hadn't registered before. You're doing it to yourself because you're almost expecting to hear it from someone else. And if you do, then you're like, well, I know that already. Like I've been telling that to myself for years now. And so you are building almost like this like tougher skin for yourself. It's like, how have I been building my own shield in a way by being meaner to myself? Yeah.
Yeah. So, from an IFS lens, an internal family systems lens, which is just another modality of therapy, is we have many parts and there's no bad parts. Every
Mhm.
part is there to protect us.
Right.
Every part has the best intention, but most parts have blinders on. So it's only seeing one thing and being like, must protect from that. So it's having a behavior and managing or protecting you in a certain way and not realizing that A, it might have a domino effect that's not as positive, and B, it perceived that it worked for you at one point in your life, but you're not in that same circumstance anymore, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, when you were a child, you were feelings really weren't allowed. If you had a feeling, you're too much, right? It's like you kind of as a child learn to be smaller. Like if I really show my big expressive emotions, I'm going to get yelled at. I'm going to be whatever, gaslit. I'm going to be told not to feel that way. So perhaps you go smaller, right? So that part might later in life as an adult be like, don't feel or don't share that. Don't tell anyone how you're feeling. Keep it in, keep it in. It's not safe to share. When really now you might be in a very loving relationship with friends, family, spouse, whatever. And it may not be true that it's unsafe to have your feelings, but we believe it because that part hasn't been updated. That part is still living in sort of a time warp of what worked for them to survive at that time, right? And so we'll have wounded parts and then we'll have parts that will come in to protect us that will start doing things like, for example, for that, start putting us down like, don't have a feeling, you're stupid, you're weak, like, don't do that, shake it off. You might have that internal critical voice inside of you because it's protecting you from what it learned at one point that maybe it wasn't safe to have those feelings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I love internal family systems like IFS. I read a book about it and it was like very fascinating, all the different parts that we have, and it resonates. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing.
And whatever framework you look in, the archetype framework, we're going to have a warrior, we're going to have a victim, we're going to have all the things. Or if you look in their child's lens, we're wounded at a certain age. And so that part of us still exists within us, filling the wound until we heal it, till we go in and we
Mhm.
do the work. And so to translate that, like the energy work that I'm talking about, like instead of the analogy of releasing the air out of the bags, if you will, it's analogy of, okay, we've got an ouchie. And every time someone pokes, think about it, when you have a raw infected wound and someone even pokes like near it, it's still
Oh, yeah.
sensitive
Yeah.
and tender, right?
Yeah.
Never mind if someone pokes the actual wound, it's like, "Ugh." So we're going to be like defensive. Don't touch me. Don't touch me as we're trying to protect that wound, especially if someone keeps trying to poke it, right? So if we're thinking
Mm.
about emotional wounds, if we have a really raw wound that was never healed and someone's poking at it intentionally or unintentionally, we're going to have this like defensive way of coming in and trying to block that, right? Or fall apart because we just can't handle the pain because it's just too much pain.
Right.
But when we go in and we heal the wounds, which is often witnessing, witnessing that inner child. This is another way to do this energy work is to witness the inner child, see what she went through or he went through. I'm say she because we're both female right now, and honor their experience, validate, yep, that was really, really hard. And then some people call it reparenting, some people call it many things, but you give it love, you give it light, you give it what it didn't have then. so you can heal the wounds. Like, what does a little kid need when they're upset? They need a hug, right? So we do that. So that part no longer has to be stuck. So that wound starts to heal. So when people poke, it's not as painful, right? So that's just
Right.
like another way of looking at it, but it's all the same thing.
Hmm. So, as you were talking about energy, I know that you're a Reiki master. How do
Mhm.
you, or that you also have different energy healing modalities that you integrate? So, how do you integrate them when you're working with clients? And how did you even end up combining like this very clinical social worker side with energy healing?
Yeah. I mean, I love to talk about this stuff because it makes me so happy. So I always knew I wanted to be a therapist. Always knew since I was a little girl, wanted to help people with their feelings or emotions. I just knew that was my calling. So assumed it meant that I had to be, clinical. And whether that meant social work or psychology or psychiatry, I didn't understand the difference when I was young. I just knew I wanted to be that. And then so eventually figured out the path that made sense to me. That's neither here nor there how I ended up in social work, but that's just how I ended up in social work, graduate school, and became able to do mental health therapy through that route and was doing that for years. And through that time, I also had my own journey of life. I had my own traumas and hardships and bumps in the road, as anyone does. And for me, the big one was I had infertility and some pregnancy losses. So during that time, I needed more than just talking about what was happening to me. It wasn't enough. It was like, I feel it viscerally. So I started doing any holistic thing I could do,
Mhm.
right? So anything from acupuncture to cranial sacral therapy to yoga to anything to Reiki. That was my first time having Reiki. Anything I could do to A, make my chances of getting pregnant better, and B, to feel better. But then I started my family eventually and was just doing clinical work and didn't really think I could, didn't even occur to me I could blend them until I
Yeah.
met a therapist and she was like, I'd like to do a Reiki session on you. I was like, okay. And she told me that this is my work, this is my life's work, and that I need to be doing this, and that I'm very intuitive and that this is my path. And I laughed in her face because I was like, I'm not intuitive. She's like, you're psychic. I'm like, I'm not
Yeah, of course.
psychic. So when you're with your clients, how do you know what's really bothering them, even though they're not telling you? I'm like, because I'm a trained therapist. I just know. And she's like, and how do you? She's asking all these questions, and I was answering them like, because that's what you do. She's like, I want you to go find a bunch of other therapists and ask these questions and see what they say. So I went and I asked, and they
Mm.
were like baffled. They're like, well, no, we wait for them to tell us, or, we can have a hunch, but like, we don't know. Like the way they were explaining it. And I was like, oh, that's not, it's like someone who's never seen clearly doesn't know they don't see clearly until
Oh,
that's
yeah.
on them, right? Like I didn't know that everyone didn't just know
Right. Right.
some of the things that I knew and the way I saw things. So she intrigued me. And so she said that she was going to train me in Reiki. So she trained me in Reiki and I loved it, but I really was just using it on myself and my family because I kept asking her, how do we combine this? And she was
Mm.
like, you don't, you just kind of live in both worlds. So that was my assumption. And she was amazing and I'm grateful for her. She was the gateway in for me, but she really kept it separate. So I assumed I had to. And then I just got years went by and I'm like, I want to learn more Reiki. I want to learn, but I got to figure out. I tried a little this, I tried a little that. And then I found a class called Psychic Reiki. And that was mind blowing. I'm like, wait a minute, it can help me figure out about my intuition as well as teach me more Reiki. So that was my gateway and even deeper. And it turned out the teacher was also a mental health therapist. And I was like, wait a minute. And so she combines both. She never got her license because she didn't think she could. She just wanted, she was already a psychic and already doing Reiki, and so much was coming in. And she was like, I need to know how to handle this. I better go to school to be a therapist so I can learn how to handle the emotions that come up. But
Mm.
she got me thinking, like, everything you're doing is still clinical, even though it's not traditional, right? So then someone told me about energy psychology, and there's actually an energy psychology association for energy psychology organization that's trying to legitimize energy psychology more. So I figured, well, that's sort of legit. That's still legit. Like, I'm not totally woo woo if I start taking some courses and trainings and certifications with them. So I kind of got more in there. And then I saw how everyone was using energy psychology tools, using chakras, while we're clearing, like I just gave the example where we're clearing mental blocks. And then I learned that like EFT tapping is energy work, EMDR is energy work, all these things that are accepted in psychology. Right. And then I started just having the Reiki come in to the therapy room. Like I was just like, would you be open to this? I just feel as though this would be helpful for your regulation, or just sort of naturally like spilling over. And I was like, okay, I need to really figure out how this is A, ethical, B, doable, and like figure this all out. So I searched around and I found that there's a lot of other people doing it. There's one man who had written a book in the 70s about psychotherapy Reiki. And so I started reading that. I started finding all these other people who were doing it. And then I found this woman who went to graduate school right through her doctorate all the way in clinical mental health. And her whole dissertation was on integrative work. And then she got out and was like, okay, I'm going to practice. And she was like, how can I do this ethically? And everyone's like, I don't know, you can't. She's like, I just literally spent 8 years of school talking about how this is beneficial. And now the world's telling me I can't. So she hired a whole slew of lawyers to figure this all out. And now she trains therapists. And so I did some work with her just to fine tune and make sure. And so what I have learned, it is completely ethical. It is completely appropriate and it's so powerful because basically as a mental health professional, there's many different licenses out there, but the idea is that you are trained in tools to enhance and assist the psychotherapy. And as long as you're trained in those tools and you can prove with your framework of how you see the modalities that you use and your framework of understanding the concepts of mental health and psychotherapy, if you can say how this is helping and supporting, then it's ethical and it's totally legal and it's totally fine. And so she helped me see how I can make this legitimate. Now, how I actually do it is in many ways. I don't have a cookie cutter approach because I don't have a cookie cutter approach for anything because I'm so about tuning to the client, to the individual. So I'm not going to do a certain protocol just because it's a protocol. I'm going to do what's needed in the room, right? So sometimes I am doing the AIT, the top down breathing that I told you about already. And I'm doing Reiki on each chakra while they're doing it to help clear out the blocks even more. Sometimes I'm having someone get really activated and they're having a hard time in a session. And we just pause and we do some Reiki to help them get to the parasympathetic system to like get them reorganized and regulated. Sometimes they come in and I'm like, oh, you're not ready to do any work. You just can tell that they're just totally. So we'll do some Reiki then to do that. But Reiki is not my only energy modality. I'm also trained in a few others. One's called quantum light wave healing and I'm in emotion code, a couple different ones. So I just intuitively am guided as to what to use, when to use it, and how to use it. And it's just fluid.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you found a way to integrate it and also the fact that it all works out, right? It's all ethical. It all works in the space. And I think you're right. I think the more I always see them as different tools. And so the more tools that you can offer or that you can provide, they all end up helping the client anyway. And you sort of find which one fits when. The one thing I wanted to bring up as well, and this has come up with some of the clients that I see for Reiki, or at least I've heard about this, right? So there's a lot of technology out there, a lot of new technologies. Now, with ChatGPT specifically, I know that some people will use it, I don't want to say as a full therapist, but they do use it in that sort of fashion. And so I wanted to get your thoughts about how you see this really playing into an actual traditional therapist role. Do we think that AI is going to take over? I mean, I don't think it will, but what are some of the things that we should be mindful of, especially when we're starting to use things like AI for asking them about things that we're dealing with, right? And they can be really difficult things that we might need answers to.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you asked me this question because I hear people say all the time, like, oh, ChatGPT is my therapist. I'm like, whoa, slow down. Let's differentiate. And so let's also admit that like different individuals use therapists for different reasons, right? And so some go and just want to process their stuff. If you want to pay someone just to process your stuff, by all means. There's a lot more that we clinicians do that beyond just sitting there and letting someone process their stuff. What I would say AI is good for is new perspectives, new lenses, new narratives. We get so locked into seeing it our way. And there are many ways, there are many truths about one thing. And it's just a story that we tell us.
Mm.
AI is beautiful to say, I'm feeling this way. I'm really upset. This is how I see it. Help me see another narrative. Help me see how Joe Schmo is seeing this differently than me. Help me have new narratives, new lens. It is a beautiful way to help you kind of have new perspectives. Nothing wrong with using it that way. I think it could be really valuable to help you find the right words. Let's say you really want to talk to someone about something and you're like, I just want to yell at them. You could be like, how can I say this nicer? You know,
Oh, yeah,
it
yeah,
could give
yeah,
you some
exactly.
ideas of communication barrier ideas. Okay. It can help you sort of like a journal, right? You could say, like, I want to process my feelings right now. I'm going to journal. Prompt me with some insightful questions for me to have more exploration. Like that would be totally fine to use it that way. If we're not talking about a crisis, we're just like,
Yeah.
I don't really know if I should join this group or whatever. I'm torn. I have feelings and I don't really know what my feelings are. And it's like, give me some insightful questions to ask myself.
Mm.
You're doing the work. It's not AI that's doing the work. It's just making you think a little deeper. It's just like if you read a journal book and it asked you some prompts. I think that that's okay to use it in that way if you choose to. We'll say there's, some environmental stuff going on about using AI like so often. So keep in mind that it's not having an impact. I'll just say that. I'm not going to get political or anything like that because I use AI for myself too. But just keeping in mind, if we're just going to sit there and journal with it, is it really using it? Is it really necessary? But what AI cannot do and is not good for it, and where I really want to draw the line and boundary is why it's not replacing therapy and it should not replace therapy. Man, the list could go on forever, but I just jotted down a few things here in my notes that I want to make sure I say. For one, it cannot track your nervous system. It has no idea how you're reacting and responding to what it's giving you. And it takes a skilled therapist to be able to be attuned to an individual, see where they're at, see when we need to pause, see when we need to help regulate, see when there's a question that needs to be answered. There's no attunement, which means there's no ability to have intuition to help guide this person, right? And it is saying blanket stated statements like it's not really necessarily about you and your situation. So it may not actually be helpful if it's giving you some advice, or not that I'm saying therapists are out there giving advice, but it's not attuned to you and your circumstance. They can't track your relational patterns, right? If you're with a therapist for a long time, you'd be like, oh, it's really interesting that you're having this, situation. It reminds me of this situation. Did you make that connection? I'm doing that constantly where I'm like, you're really upset with your
Mhm.
partner. I'm wondering if this is tugging on a cord from how your mom used to do that. I'm able to make these,
Mm.
and that's a big part of my work. I firmly believe that everything we do, every way we react, how we respond in our given moment right now is all connected to where we've been,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So it can't have that insight for you, which would miss the whole point of therapy because therapy is healing old wounds in my mind. So if it's just dealing with like, oh, you should maybe do this right now for this situation, it's not giving you the opportunity to go deeper and understand why am I even triggered in the first place? Why is my reaction this way? What can I do within myself to heal this so that I can have a new way of coping right now? Right?
And pattern recognition, right? That's
Yeah.
sort of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, seeing the dots connecting and the threads.
Yes. It can't read your emotional shifts. It can't hear your tone, right? It can't read your energy. I mean, here we are talking about how important energy is. It can't feel that. It can't read that. So it's
Right.
going to miss things. It's also programmed to tell you exactly what you want to hear. I mean, it's comical. I'll use it for work sometimes, and it will be like, it will say something and then I'll respond to it. And it will give me a whole paragraph of fluff of that was very insightful of you to think about that. And you're so smart. And I might as well say, you're so pretty. Like it's ridiculous how much it kisses your you know what. So if you really want to have insights that are not tainted with just trying to make you happy, that's not going to be the place where you're going to get honest feedback, right? Also, research has shown that the number one factor for successful therapy is the relationship of the client and the therapist. And you can't have that kind of relationship with AI. You can't co-regulate with AI. Big part of my job is to be not just to be attuned to then model how I use my nervous system to regulate, to help them see how they can regulate. It can't repair old wounds. It can't witness you. It's one of the most healing things is to be witnessed, right? To be
Mhm.
seen. All we want in this world is to be seen and heard, right? And it can't do energy psychology. And I'm a firm believer
Right.
that energy psychology is the way to work on the emotions, the mind, the body, the spirit, soul, all of it all at once is the most deepest healing, in my opinion.
Thank you for sharing that. I totally agree with all the points that you said. And I'm laughing at the one about the, AI being validating in a way, right? And I think you and I talked about this earlier. And so it's funny because I've definitely had friends tell me, like, oh, they were going through something, they typed it into ChatGPT. And of course, the response that they get back was, you're right. AI just validated it. They essentially said, you're right. It's because of X, Y, and Z, because of what you just mentioned. And then the person that typed it in is feeling great. They're like, yeah, I know I was right. Yep, of course. And so it's not necessarily creating like that challenge, that pushback that I think oftentimes I find to be the most healing and where I have the most growth. Whenever I get pushback, it's hard for me to get it. But after like a couple of days, like it sinks in and I'm like, yeah, I needed that. I needed that firm, tough love.
Mhm.
So after our conversation, I actually went into my chat GPT and I changed the setting,
Mhm.
like the tone of it. And so now it's much more robotic and direct and it doesn't give me any of that like fluff in the beginning, which I like.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Which is great because we don't need all the fluff. We're trying to get our work done. We don't necessarily want to be reading a paragraph, but I still err on caution that even if it's direct, I know you're not saying this, but to the audience, even though you can change it to be direct, it's still not a replacement of therapy because it's still going to agree with you just directly.
Right. Exactly. I definitely need
Mhm.
some pushback sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I look at the pushback as helping you be insightful. Right? Helping and yeah, you could look at it as like calling you out. And yeah, do I call out some of my clients? I'm sure. But it's more like helping it's being the mirror, helping
Mhm.
your clients see what they can't see. Being like, I know you keep saying that, and I know that's what you believe. That's your narrative right now. But it's like perspective taking, like, and I'm seeing it this way. What do you think? You know what I mean? What do you think of that? Keep saying you're going to do this, but you don't, or whatever it is that we're calling them out on. It's really
Mhm.
just hold the mirror up for them to help them see what they're not quite seeing yet. And that's part of the growth.
Yeah. Are there any things that we did not cover that you still want to highlight or that you want to mention especially around mental health or anything that we talked about. I think there's, of course, like this is a topic that is so big, but what would be the most helpful for someone to know about their mental health? Maybe things to pay attention to or notice or.
So some of the thoughts that I wanted to make sure we covered is we're all human. We all have emotions. We all will feel happy, sad, stress. We're all going to feel it. They're all normal experiences. And it doesn't mean that we're dysregulated just because we're feeling them. Though we can feel them and still be in regulation. A lot of people think regulation means calm. It doesn't. Regulation means we're in our window of tolerance and we can handle, right? So we're going to have these ups and downs and fluctuations. And we're going to need to ride the wave. I think of emotions as a wave. We try so hard to like put a dam up to our feelings, like a dam up to the water, the ocean, and not let it flow. But the reality is, if you just let the wave come in and roll out, it really doesn't take long. It might feel intense, but it's not as hard. What's so painful is all the work it takes to try to push it down, right? And then it's like, oh, I can't imagine it coming up because it's like the pain on top of pain because you've been holding it down. So let emotions ride over you. They are safe. They are okay. It's only dysregulation when you can't come out of it and you tried your tools and you're not able to turn your nervous system off from that fight or flight, freeze, fawn mode, right? But it's normal to have the flow and the ups and downs. And some people say, like, well, at what point do you need a mental health therapist? Well, my belief is that we all need doctors because we all have physical bodies. My belief is we could all benefit from mental health specialists because we all have emotions and nervous systems, personally. And I
Mhm.
think that we're here on earth to evolve, to learn. Some people believe we're coming in with karma, that we're here to work through. Some people just believe that we're here to, whether you believe in karma or not, we're here to have the growth and learn from the obstacles we've been through. There's always work, there's always layers. I'm a believer that we come in to work through our karma until we learn all the lessons we need to learn, and then we could be ascended. Right.
Mm.
And so if we're human and we're here, that means there's still layers. There's still layers to learn about. There's still layers to heal. Doesn't mean we're broken. It just means we have still focuses that haven't, rocks that haven't been turned over yet that we could do to help with our old patterns and our own belief systems and our own narratives. And we can live a healthier, happier life. So I believe you don't need to wait till you're so dysregulated to see therapist. I hope that if you are, that you do, but that there's benefits even before then. So I want to make sure people know that. I'm a firm believer we can all use the support for growth. But one of the questions you asked me before we got on was, what are some things people can do to support their own mental health and their own well-being? And so my number one I got two recommendations, but we're really connected, is to stay in alignment. When we go off of alignment, that's when chaos, turmoil, challenges happen and we get dysregulated. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we are actually shown every moment and every time what is right for us. We override it over and over again. We're too tired, but we keep going, right? We're too stressed, but we don't give ourselves a break. I know I should go to sleep, but we have poor sleep habits. We like our system is constantly telling us. There are times where, and like I was really good at this and then I lost it. And then now I'm course correcting, getting back in alignment. But there was a period of time recently where I was just so busy and I could feel my body needing to like stop looking at the screen, needing to just tune into myself, needing to take a mini break, to close my eyes just for a few minutes. And I wasn't listening to it. Right. And I was just like, no, it's too much to do. Just keep going. I wasn't stopping to meditate. I wasn't, like yoga in the morning feels amazing for me. I love that. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do it today. Right. I wasn't listening to the cues. When we don't listen to the cues, that's when we go into dysregulation. When we
Mm.
start spinning. So just pay attention to yourself. Just tune in. And the outside world's expectations shouldn't be louder than the gut instinct, the intuition, your inner compass is telling you. right? I know some things it's like you got to pick your kids up at 3:30. There's no way around it. You got to pick up your kids at 3:30. I get that. Okay. And before you leave, you could just put your hands and your eyes in your hands and just let your hands hold your head for just half of a minute.
Hmm.
Because just being held, remember, our brain is not that smart. It loves to be held. Just hold your head,
Yeah.
hold your eyes, right? Outside expectations. Oh, but I have to get this all done. Like, is there time, And so I used to have this mentality of like, oh my God, there's so much on my to do list. I'm so stressed out. I have to get it done. And it wouldn't make it go any faster. In fact, it probably made it go slower because I spent more energy on stressing about it being all done. But it didn't make more time for me. All it did was use up my energy source
Mm.
and my resources. So changing my mind and my narrative, right? I keep going back to these narratives, is there's plenty of time. It will get done. And suddenly I'm going through everything and I'm getting through it faster and more peaceful because I've changed my attitude. I've changed my outlook on it. Right. And when I'm like, nope, stop, I'm stopping. So my biggest advice is listen to your cues and pay attention to the narratives, the stories, the words, they have energy.
Yeah.
Be aware of those and tune into yourself is like the biggest gift you can give to yourself.
I love that. There was one thing that I wanted you to explain because I've definitely heard fight or flight for sure,
Mhm.
but freeze and fawn, was that the other one? Can you explain those two to me?
Yes. So our nervous system is built for survival, right? Like that part, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn is for survival. Okay. You're a caveman, saber-tooth tiger shows up. You're not going to want to be in your thinking brain. You're going to have, like, Mother Nature created this instinctual thing.
Mhm.
You're either going to fight for your life or you're going to run and get out of there, whichever one seems to be the best choice in the moment. Okay. Freeze always existed. You're so frozen. You can't run and you can't fight. You're shut down. You're frozen. Okay. That's the caveman that gets eaten, right?
Okay. Survival of the fittest, right?
But it exists, right? We've all frozen. Like, I don't know what to do. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Thought's a newer one, and I don't. This is what it is, and a lot of people use it. I have mixed feelings about it as being a core of these. Fun is when you say yes, you do whatever you can to stay safe.
Mm. Oh,
Right?
okay.
Instead of fighting, and instead of running, instead of freezing,
Yeah.
you're agreeing, right? You're going along. You're just trying to do what it takes to survive.
Got
So
it.
I do believe we do that, but I personally think, that's a coping strategy,
Mm.
not a reflex.
Got it.
And the others are reflexes in my mind. But
Okay.
there's no point in what difference does it make whether it's a reflex or it's just something we do, right? But what's interesting is that we can freeze when we're in hypervigilant and hypovigilant. Okay. So
Mm.
hypervigilant, we're like, oftentimes this is where the ego is. It's like, we have to run, we have to do something, we have to, you know what I mean? But you can also freeze because it's like, oh, so much to do and you can't move, but you're still in this hyperactivity, right?
Mhm.
And then the hypovigilance is often associated with the freeze. It's like I can't move, can't, which is true, but you can also freeze because you're so activated, right? But you can freeze because you're so not activated. So it's interesting. Like some people use more of those nervous system terms of like hyper and the hypo.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when we are dealt with a stressor, our body will get stressed, meaning our heart rate will increase. Our focus becomes more laser. We get more tight in our body. Like it's a physical physiology kind of response, right? When we get stressed. But it's then what does our system do with that stress? Do we then run? Do we then fight? Do we then freeze? Or do we then bring in coping mechanisms where we get someone to death or you know what I mean? But that's essentially what's happening.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. So this has been such a lovely conversation. Where can people learn more about you and the work that you do?
So my website's probably the easiest and best way because it's just my name. It's so simple. It's just www.jillvetstein.com. You can contact me there. All my socials are there. It's just probably the easiest way. Oh, and the top down breathing, the AID, the whole guide. So easy. You just put in your email and you'll have all of it. So that's a great resource for people if they want to learn how to do that for themselves.
I'm so glad we were able to have this chat.
Thank you for listening. If you're interested in becoming a client and working with me, visit me at nunatherapy.com or follow me on social media at Nuna Therapy for regular content and inspiration. Until next time.